To the Lifestyle and Community Committee meeting. It's the 830th round. This morning we have a relatively thin agenda, but some meaty topics in there. I did hear from Councillor O'Neill. She tendered her apologies this morning. I think Councillor O'Neill's a part of our committee. Of course she is. Former Deputy Chair. Would someone like to move? So Councillor Caldwell, seconded by Councillor Tozer, just noting Councillor O'Neill's apologies. And also had one from Councillor Young, though he's not on the committee. No, he's not, but he mentioned it to me yesterday. Anyone? He's a nice guy, that lovable scamp. So Councillor Vorster, Belden Lumsden, Mr Mayor's not here, Councillor Gates, Caldwell, LaCastro, Tozer, O'Neill, we've noted. Okay, happy days. Let's do that now that I've moved to that on the agenda. Councillors, that's moved by Councillor Caldwell, seconded by Councillor Tozer. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried. That's 1 and 2 dealt with. Confirmation of minutes we'll deal with as a start item. Councillors, any conflicts of interest today? No, we'll deal with 3 and 4 as start items. 5.1, any desire to unstar that? No, 5.1 can remain starred. 6.2, councillors, can that remain starred as well? Wonderful, the others are unstarred. Would someone like to move the start items? Councillor Gates, seconded by Councillor Tozer. Councillors, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried. Wonderful. Right, councillors, we have item 6.1, which is our first substantive and unstarred item to deal with. It's the Safer School Leaver response. So, Councillor Gates, you had some questions. Steve, do we have a presentation or no? All right, Councillor Gates, if you've got some questions, I'll direct those either through myself to Director Twine or Steve.
Okay, through you then, Chair. On page 23, there's a list of the council services. Do each of those have a value, and do we know how much it is in total? The use of the land, the camera network, the site preparation, the waste services, the lifeguards, the road closures.
Through you, Mr Chairman, the total in-kind provided for the last response was just over $25,000. By way of breakdown, I couldn't talk to specifics, but if we look at those line items there, that would be made up of park fees, staff in the camera network, the T&I team to go out and ensure the beach was prepared, disposal of waste and lifeguards at night, etc. But the total is $26,000.
Okay. And what was the reason for suggesting that CPI increases are provided and that the car parking fees be excluded from the allocation?
Through you, Mr Chairman, the car parking fees is an item that has never been included in the in-kind, i.e. the total value of those parks have never been added up and taken off that in-kind amount. So we're essentially saying a continuation of that. In terms of the communication around a CPI increase, so the state government, we have a very close relationship, obviously, when it comes to the delivery of this. They presented us with the updated information, including budgets for the future response. And based on the fact that CPI has essentially been sitting below that 2% mark for a number of years, and the city's investment or amount of financial support has not changed really through that last 3-year period, their future projections around costing of goods and services, in their strong opinion, they need to ensure that some greater funds can be put into that pot to cover the additional expenses that come with labour and the infrastructure and so forth.
And is their allocation going up by CPI as well?
Through you, Mr Chairman, the allocation that the state government have indicated sits at right around $2 million.
But there's no CPI increases for their amount indicated in our report.
Through you, Mr Chairman.
I'll just jump in there. So through you, Mr Chair, we've had discussions with the state and they have indicated that their total budget is also going to be going up by CPI.
Okay, and do we know, I only have one more question, Chairman, through you. Do we know the value of the Schoolies Festival to the city?
Through you, Mr Chairman, an economic impact study hasn't been completed in the past. It's an item that the Queensland Government haven't gone in that direction. If we feel as though that's something that would be of benefit to determining the return on investment of the city's investment, always happy to pursue that with the state.
So, Councillor Gates, I think you've raised some really good points there. Were you of a mind to change the recommendation, drawing attention?
I was of a mind to do that if you felt that...
So, just let me ask you, so I'm not proposing words, but I just want to see if I got this.
Well, what I had crossed out was base in number 2, and I had just suggested that a maximum of $450,000 be made available annually for 23, 24 and 25, full stop.
Okay, so if the state were increasing their contribution by CPI, are you suggesting that we do not? Because from the position as chair, I got the impression you were looking for them to do at least as much as we were doing in terms of indexation.
Correct.
So if they are indexing, are you proposing that we do not index?
Look, if this report said they were indexing by CPI, I wouldn't have a problem. I just have a problem that it says we are and
Sure.
they're not.
So I suppose where my thinking was landing is that we amend 3, rather,
Yep.
to say that the level of financial support be adjusted by CPI in both 2024 and 2025, subject to the state government doing the same with its own
I'm
contribution.
happy with that, Chairman.
Is that right? But that was only one of the issues you raised. Perhaps we should add a 5th, that the city requests the state carry out some economic benefit study into the
It would be
staging of
good
the
to
event.
know, like
Yeah.
it is a major event, and there's another query, like if it's a major event, why does it land here and not with major events?
Right.
We don't know the return on investment, and it's just like pulling a figure and saying, yeah, you can have this.
Yep. Carry out an economic benefit study into the, can we call it schoolies, into the event. And for those results to be shared with council. Yeah. And let's modify 3.
Double denim.
So, sorry, Steve, instead of calling it an economic benefit study, should we be calling it an economic impact analysis? What's the language in the event space around determining what the...
Mr Chairman, just in response to the Deputy Mayor's question in relation to why something like this wouldn't sit with MEGC, so the terminology used around this is that it is a safety response as a result of 18,000 school leavers all congregating on Surfers Paradise Beach, as opposed to use of the word event that becomes a promotional item and so forth. If there was a view that the state should be determining what the economic impact of the safety response is to the Gold Coast,
So not the response, but schoolies as an experience. So we want to slurp up all of the economic benefits that might flow from the period where schoolies is marketed.
Mr Chairman, I think the number 5 there is a fair...
But is the term economic benefit study, or is it an economic impact analysis? Is there a standard
Mr Chairman,
phrase?
I mean, I would think, either that, economic impact assessment, I think that will all lead to, the mopping up, like you say, of the outcomes.
Yep. So are you comfortable with that, Councillor Gates? And then 3, that the level of financial support be adjusted by CPI in both 2024 and 2025, subject to the state government making the same at least the same commitment. I think that's a much more robust recommendation there.
I do.
You happy to move that, Councillor Gates?
I am. I'm just seeking guidance from Steve about taking out the car parking, like that they pay for the car parking
so
out of the 450,
So this is for the Red Frogs.
the car parking.
Yes, it's for the Red Frog volunteers, and I spoke with
Okay.
Elton Twine.
Leave it as it is, it's
Yeah.
fine.
I had the same suspicion as you.
Yep.
Interrogated, but yeah, we want those volunteers in the
Sure.
precinct.
Sure, get it. Okay.
So that's moved by Councillor Gates. Councillors, does someone want to second that? I'm happy to do so. So that's moved by Councillor Gates, seconded by myself. Pushing back against the cost shifting. Councillors, any further questions on that? No? Here. I'll put that to a vote then. And not the Toolies. No Toolies in this chamber. Councillors, all those in favour? All those against? That's carried. That's like a gaff. All right, thanks for that, Steve. All right, councillors, we now have item 6.3. Councillor Hamill, my recollection is this came about as a result of a GB item, moved a little while ago. Before the meeting, you said you're reasonably comfortable with the recommendation, but had some questions. Happy days. We have Tony and Jody. Good morning.
Morning, councillors.
Right. Councillor Hamill.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Chair, through you, just a few questions. Just first of all, in regards to shed ownership, so the report mentions that the last audit identified 81 members at South Coast Restoration Society. I was just wondering if we had documentation to kind of prove those numbers and if we had information around where in the city or those members lived.
Through the chair. So unfortunately at this stage we haven't actually received that information as yet. We only were able to receive the actual membership numbers, but we're working on getting the suburbs at an absolute minimum.
Okay. Mr. Chair, second question is in regards to the $500,000 that was granted to the Restoration Society as part of the lease consolidation. That $500,000 was given for a list of reasons for upgrades to electrical boxes, connections to sewerage and water networks, etc. I just wanted to check, is it the officers' understanding that Restoration Society were going to charge individual buildings or lessees or private shed owners an additional fee for connections, or was the $500,000 to be the extent of it to cover all those works?
So that 500,000, sorry, through the chair, was towards capital works, and it was to make sure all of those connections were compliant, and also to all of the facilities that needed it as well. So as far as we were concerned, it should have reached all of those buildings which actually needed it and should have paid for all of that as well.
So, Mr. Chair, just for a bit of context around that question, I've become aware that South Coast Restoration Society have given an invoice to one of the sub-lessees on the site, and that invoice is for connection to water and sewerage. I have a real problem with that because, in my belief, ratepayer funds were gifted to the society to make those connections, and then an on-charge by the group doesn't sit well with me. So I've raised that with officers and they've given undertaking to look into that further, but I just wanted to check in that wasn't their understanding of what that money was there for in the first place. Mr. Chairman, in the report it mentions about that we've yet to receive some information from previous AGMs, including audited financials. Could I just check, would I be correct in my thinking that failure to provide audited financials would be a breach of lease if they're not provided in the future?
Technically, yes. We can actually ask to provide any of that information. They must provide it within 30 days and 14 days as per the lease conditions. It is potentially a breach of their Incorporations Act as well
Yep.
to be able to.
And Mr Chair, through you to Jody, how many times have we requested that information now from your recollection?
Honestly, I've lost count.
Okay.
We have requested that a few
That's
times.
fair enough, but more than once?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, definitely more than once. Mr Chair, the report goes into some detail around that there's 57 structures identified on the site, which I have to admit, it's only in about the last month that I or the city had confirmation of that number of buildings on the site after a very detailed survey had to be completed to identify what was there. You'll see in the report that there are claims of private shed ownership over 18 of those buildings. I was wondering to get some more detail from officers. So that claim of private shed ownership, what documentation have city officers been privy to so far in terms of legal documents or agreements to try and prove this claim of private shed ownership?
So through the chair, to date, we've only received 3 hard copy agreements that have been through South Coast Restoration Society and these private shed owners, but there is no agreement between the city and those groups either.
So you made that point there. So there is no agreement between the city and any individual or identity over any of those buildings. Have South Coast Restoration Society been able to provide copies of these so-called agreements between them and the private owners, or notional private owners or suggested private owners?
Yeah, so through the chair, to date, only 3 have been provided and we're still chasing the other ones.
All right. And has that request of Restoration Society been made in writing of them to provide that evidence?
Yes.
Yeah. Mr Chair, final question is that as part of the detailed survey of the site, we engaged a consultant and I believe our electrical foreman might have gone out with them to do an audit of the buildings. In the report, it lists a table of all the structures and it lists in very minimal detail a few issues identified in some of those buildings, of which several of those buildings are notionally the ones where private ownership is claimed. I was just looking for a bit more detail to understand that now that we've identified those issues, which some of them are fairly serious, what does that look like from now in terms of process of ensuring that rectification occurs, or what happens next?
So through the chair, as part of our building inspection program, whenever we inspect these buildings, there is an action plan that is put in place with these lessees. Each of those are listed in priority order and timeframes against that as well, and we do have an officer that keeps track of all of that. So to date, they have actioned all of the high priority and immediate ones, and we're just continuing to follow up on the remainder.
Yep. And so we continue to monitor. Is there timeframes been given on that? So there's a timeframe for the containers to be removed, but has there been a timeframe given that all works to rectify the issues identified have to be done by?
Through the chair, yes, there is an action plan that has been put in place with the club to be able to rectify all those issues.
Chair, I think I'm going to leave it at that for questions. That's fleshed out a little bit more on a few of my concerns and what I guess some of my original concerns of raising the GBI were. So that's all the questions I had.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Hamill, and we'll come to Councillor Gates next. I mean, you've raised these concerns. I mean, do you have every confidence that city officers are well placed to address those concerns, or do you feel as though now or between now and council there needs to be some further direction provided in a recommendation? Because, I mean, they relate to safety, process, they're reasonably serious concerns.
Mr Chair, to answer your question, I have every confidence in our officers. Yep. I have every confidence when I raised this GBI, I opened up a difficult issue for them to have to approach that is obviously come about after 40 years of it being part of a different council in a time ago and lease consolidations and different committees and different issues that it's not a straightforward problem. It's complex. and that we want to be careful, because in the end we're dealing with a volunteer community group and we have to be mindful of that. I have every confidence over the last 12 months we've gone about it in a highly professional manner in an appropriate manner, and that the recommendation, the report and the recommendation clearly identifies that there are issues to be dealt with. I think a little bit more of the detail Jodie's given in terms of process gives me that confidence, and now the ball is really back in the South Coast Restoration Society's court, that it's been identified, they've got timeframes. Failure to meet those timeframes and do what needs to be done, that would be when a next step really needs to be looked at.
So my experience is that quite often when you're dealing with a community group that's emotionally invested into a precinct, that communication is important, and no doubt these groups have been communicated with by city officers for some time. Is there a public interest in, I suppose, the basis for council's decision today? Well, is there an interest in making sure that the reasons for our decision are captured in something that's easily digestible and perhaps, you know, I'm not saying put on a media release, but at least summarised in some way that you might be able to share, Councillor Hamill, if there are questions, or is this something you can manage yourself in your community?
So, Mr Chair, I'd absolutely agree with your point that a group that's had a lease for this length of time definitely has an incredibly strong emotional connection, and that's something we've had to be mindful through the process. I'm confident that the level of communication between my office and city officers over the last 12 months is appropriate for what needs to occur, and that if there's any further questions from this, we could address it. And for me, the recommendation does enough that in that regard.
No worries.
Yep.
That's good. Councillor Gates and then Councillor Tozer.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just in regard to the ownership of the structures, I know that it's long been thought that if anyone built a structure on the council land, that it became council property, but there was a gentleman's agreement that the shed owners, if they wished, could remove their shed and take it if they wanted to vacate the site rather than sell it. So with this new information, has that position changed? Or is that still as it is, that they can take the shed if they want, if they vacate the site, but while it remains there, it remains in council ownership?
Thank you, Councillor Gates, through the chair. It's a challenging one, isn't it, Councillor Gates, because of the gentleman's agreement that exists in history.
Yeah.
I think my approach here would be one of a pragmatic approach. So as we continue to clean up the site and have, you know, shipping containers and those sorts of things removed, and as we look at future uses and the best use of this site, we will have a common sense conversation with those shed owners and potentially look to see whether or not they wish to remove them and take them with them. That would be my advice at the moment, that, you know, a common sense approach to this and working with the community just to make all those organisations, so those people, and not necessarily just saying, I don't see how it would be in the city's best interests to own a bunch of sheds.
Chairman, would you mind if we move into closed for budget purposes?
Should thing on the basis that it might impact budget.
Yeah.
So that's moved by Councillor Gates. Is there a seconder? Councillor Tozer. Do we have the standard form of words available for that reason? Just want to make sure we're meeting our legislative obligations. Plus, we all need to catch up on the latest political developments. Yeah.
Pardon? You always go to vote again.
Yeah. Who's chairing this, Glenn?
I made a speech. If you spin the words of whoever it was,
I'm just-
if you see me getting smaller, I'll be laughing.
Well, I can't. It's both a South African, a Kiwi,
It's
and
one of those songs
an
built.
Italian.
Oh, we haven't gone into closed yet.
No, we're just waiting.
Did I get them all?
Well,
African, Kiwi, Italian?
I lost my South African citizenship when Gary Belden made me an Australian.
Oh, does it automatically?
Yeah, if you're older than 18, when you take out an additional citizenship, you lose the South African one. Yeah.
You don't need it to go
Yeah.
to the coffee room.
Yeah, so I'm like Matt Canavan and Barnaby Joyce fused.
Like a combination.
Yeah, yeah.
He's up to no good.
William?
He asked for my card to get into the coffee room, but
Are we okay to vote on it?
doesn't.
Yeah, we are, as soon
No,
as
we're
we've got
still-
our words up there. Yeah, we're still going. I'm just waiting for the reasons to go up on the screen. All right, so I think, yeah. So if we can just get the standard words at the time that we wrap up the minutes, that's great. All right, I'll put that to a vote. Councillor Gates, Councillor Tozer. All right, all those in favour? All those against? That is carried. All right, we're back and open. Apologies to those tuned in. We were dealing with matters that would have impacted the local government budget, but having put those now to bed, we do have a motion afoot, moved by Councillor Tozer, seconded by Councillor Lacastra. We're in open. Councillor Tozer, are you happy to defer to Councillor Hamel just to share a few remarks? Yep.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and thank you to Councillor Tozer. Mr Chair, I just want to wrap up because I had plenty of chance with questions and discussion and close. So just to say that South Coast Restoration Society have had a nearly 40-year history on this site. In that time have achieved some fantastic things, but as is appropriate at all times, ensuring that we are on top of what's happening on city land and ensuring that's fit for purpose has to be paramount. The Heritage Park is an absolutely wonderful site and piece of land that is important for community use. So this report ensures that officers have got the opportunity to continue to work with South Coast Restoration Society on what their future looks like, but also opens up an important piece of planning work of what that nearly 15 hectares of land in a prime position in the north of the city for community groups looks like in the future too. And I'd just like to finish, Mr Chair, by thanking officers for their hard work in the last 12 months, for their professionalism in dealing with the Restoration Society in my office, and wish them the best of luck in the next 12 months.
Yeah.
Did you want to offer up some comments, Councillor Gates?
If I could
Please.
just acknowledge, I mean, there are some difficulties on the site. It is a fantastic site, but I simply would like to acknowledge that the association with the South Coast Restoration Society has been positive from the perspective that they voluntarily gave up 20 hectares of their site so that we could establish the Pimpamar Sports Hub on that land. And they need to tidy it up a little bit, as we've read in this report, in regard to the shipping containers. And for many years, there's been a requirement that no further construction take place on the site until they provided their business plan and what have you. So there's a few things that they still need to address, but appreciation from the city that they reduced their site to the 7.5 hectares, which allowed us to build on that great land, the Pimpamar Sports Hub, that I understand from yesterday is now at capacity. So fantastic.
Happy days. Councillors, any speakers against? No. Councillor Tozer, did you wish to close? We're going to put the motion. All right, councillors, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried. Wonderful. Councillors, we have one remaining item before we have 4 GBs to deal with. No, I'm just... I'm just testing to see if we have any sleepers.
I like that.
You like that one? Sleepers, yeah, that's nice. All right, here we go. So future options for the use of Hardy's House. It is a closed session item. Councillor Tozer, I understand you have some questions. Do they deal with confidential elements of the report? Okay, you're happy to move us
I'm ready to move to close, yeah.
Do I have a second on that? Councillor Belden-Lumsden. So we have a motion up on screen. So that's moved by Councillor Tozer, seconded by Councillor Belden-Lumsden. Just got a text message from Councillor Patterson, but I think she missed the actual news. All right, put that to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried. Stream back on. Well, thanks to all those who are still tuning in or watching us on the replay, and you might have fast forwarded that gap. We did deal with the future options for the Hardy's house item. Unfortunately, it has to be dealt with in close. It's a sensitive matter. Also has impacts on our budget. So Councillor Tozer will be a little bit constrained in what he can share, but I know there is significant community interest on this matter, and Councillor Tozer, I'd invite you to open debate.
Thank you. Yeah, this matter is obviously of great interest to lots of people in Division 9, and Hinterland Regional Park it's just on Hardy's Road, and it's a really popular park because people who go to that park can enjoy walking their dog, but they can also enjoy browsing around and seeing the cows being grazed on the adjacent lots, which is managed by the Hardy family. And Leanne and Regan, who are the current kind of family members who are managing those cows, will know that they know residents by name. They'll high five them and they'll round up their cows on the odd occasion where things get out. The cows get out, and that makes this park quite different to some of the other big playground parks in the city. And what's proposed here, I think, is truly in line with both the Hardy's parkland original master plan. I think there was an idea that this place would be a place that people really enjoy the ideas of agricultural life in the heart of a parkland right in the centre of the city, but also I think this resolution, this motion has appropriate respect for taking steps forward to, honouring the Hardy family and their agricultural legacy in our local area. Whilst in closed session we talked about some, finer details of this proposed action, I hope that we can deal with it sensitively and come up with a really good community outcome that makes this park unique to the city, but also respectful of the Hardy's legacy in our local area.
Thanks, Councillor Tozer. Any speakers against? Happy to put that to a vote. Well, I'm concerned about these stray cows. I think we need to deal with the fencing.
The fencing will be part of the solution. We do need to come up with a suitable set fencing solution.
No one sitting on the fence? No? Happy to put that to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Councillors and city officers, thank you for your patience today. To those who had to deal with a closed session stream, our apologies, but we do try and keep everything in open as much as we can. The meeting is closed at 10:28. Thanks.